It's time for The Verdict. The Verdict is a lively discussion of current events and legal issues pertinent to Oklahomans. The Verdict is hosted by Kent Myers and Mick Cornett. It's time for The Verdict.
Good morning and welcome once again to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. We have another good show this week. Cal Hobson will be on The Verdict.
Yes, the President Pro Tem of the Senate is coming back for another visit with us, and we're going to be talking about a subject that just seems like we have to keep talking about, not because we necessarily want to, but because it's always in the news, and that is tort reform. Those of us that followed what the legislature did this last session are aware that a tort reform bill was passed and signed by the governor, came out of a conference committee that was agreed to by the legislature, and no sooner had it been out and signed than the flack started that it wasn't enough, it wasn't good enough, it was bad, it was coerced, it was whatever could be said about it. And there are now efforts apparently starting to redo it or do more. I want to talk to Cal about that as well as other things, but it seems like tort reform is again going to be a major issue in Oklahoma. Whether we like it or not, whether we think it's appropriate or not is not the issue, it's with us. And nobody knows more about it than Cal, and we're pleased he'd come back once again to visit with us.
Let's jump to a break, come back. Cal Hobson will be right here on The Verdict.
There are a lot of logical reasons to buy an FX Cruiser high output from Yamaha. A clean-burning 4-stroke high-output engine, the best power-to-weight ratio in its class, Yamaha's world-renowned reliability, and countless others. But in case you need a few more reasons, just take a look at your family's faces. The new FX Cruiser high output, only from Yamaha.
That's refined Yamaha 1110 South 3rd. We're in the finest yellow pages.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information.
The sale never ends.
Folks, you talk about saving money on used cars here at John Holt Chevrolet, right here in Chickasha. How about this? 04 Alero, $11,988, and 04 Impala, $12,988. Or how about this? I'm going to give you a choice. 03 Grand Am or an 04 Malibu, your choice, $199 a month. Matter of fact, the hardest thing to do is pick your favorite color. You always get the best price. That's a promise. Come see us.
Bringing out the best in each student. That is the simple goal and tradition of Heritage Hall. The focus on the individual shapes the educational experience at Heritage Hall. Each student benefits from small classes, able, dedicated teachers, a solid academic curriculum, and exceptional co-curricular programs of athletics, arts, community service, and other activities, parental involvement, personalized counseling, and the development of responsibility, integrity, and love of learning. If you want education taught with pride, then you want Heritage Hall.
Watch CNN at 6 and 10 on KSBI. KSBI now offers the most trusted name in news every weekday evening at 6 and 10. Get the latest national and international news, as well as the most informative and relevant special reports, and live weather updates with meteorologist Brady Bruce. Watch CNN at 6 and 10 on KSBI.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett, Kent Myers. Kent's going to introduce our guest.
We are very pleased today to have, once again, the President Pro Tempore of the Senate, Honorable Cal Hobson. Cal is a native of Lexington, Oklahoma, still lives there. He is an OU graduate. He served 12 years in the House of Representatives in Oklahoma and has served 14 years in the Senate, the last couple of years as President Pro Tem. And pleased to say this is Cal's, believe it or not, 8th visit on The Verdict, and we are really pleased you'd give us as much time as you have, and welcome back.
Honored to be here. Thank you very much.
Well, it's an honor to have you.
Senator Hobson, can you summarize the legislative session from your point of view? How did it go?
I've been on record saying it's the most successful one that I've participated in the 26 years I've been honored to serve in the legislature. Now, the job is not complete because We had very close votes on the most important issues of the session, and that translates into state questions that the voters will decide in November. But in the area of education, I think there are two critical areas that the voters will decide whether they endorse. Governor Henry's lottery proposal from last year earmarks, dedicates all the money to education. And a second provision that the voters will decide is a constitutional protection of the current amount of money going to education, so you can't withdraw money while you put money in. Secondly, remaining in the area of education, the voters will decide, are we going to regulate and control the Indian gaming casino activities in Oklahoma and take some of those proceeds and invest in education? That will be State Question 712. It also has the corollary impact of, I think, saving our horse racing industry and our horse industry in Oklahoma. And then finally, I think the most important piece of legislation from the past session will be State Question 713. And I don't want to eat up all of our time here, but the thrust of the question for the voters to decide is the following. Are you supportive of an increase in the cigarette tax to approximately the national average, and translate that additional tax into about $500 million of investments in health care in Oklahoma? We are the only state in the nation whose health indicators got worse since 1990. The only state in the nation that got worse. And our life expectancy in Oklahoma now is less than Guatemala. So this $500 million investment will be in insuring some of the hundreds of thousands of Oklahomans that are uninsured, the construction of a world-class cancer and research center right here a few miles from where we sit today, a statewide trauma system that was going to be extinct 30 June if we did not have additional investments, and many other healthcare initiatives. So I think it was a very successful session, and I think those two areas that I've enumerated are the most important.
Let me go back to what we were talking about at the outset of the show before you joined us on the set, and that is tort reform.
All right.
We, of course, in this last session heard a lot about it on this very show. We had debates on it. We've heard the pluses and minuses of it, and could you describe for our viewers exactly, well, generally, how the bill evolved that did become law?
All right. A disclaimer first. I'm not smart enough to be a doctor, and even if I was a lawyer, I wouldn't admit it. So I'm neither of those creatures, and so I think I was perhaps a good neutral arbiter on the issue of tort reform. This is the second year of tort reform activities at the Capitol, significant tort reform. The first being 2 years ago in dealing with protecting and limiting the tort exposure or the malpractice exposure for OBGYN specialists and the emergency room environment. That's the area that they told Governor Henry to work on 2 years ago. This past session was a much more expansive effort. I'm proud of the way we conducted the process. We had over 1,000 bills introduced. This bill, this tort reform piece of legislation, 91 pages of reforms, was conducted in the open, public hearings, under oath. I've never seen that before in 26 years in the legislature. 40 witnesses. Anybody who came forward and said, I want to tell you my view, whether I'm a plaintiff or a defendant, a lawyer or a victim, a doctor, whatever, they were sworn in and testified.
Before a conference committee?
Yes, a very large one, 23 members, divided among Democrats and Republicans. And before getting to the substance of the legislation, I know that's a later question, I would point out that on final passage of 2661, which I believe is the correct number for the reform bill, it was a bipartisan vote with numerous Republicans and Democrats being supportive of this piece of legislation. Since that passage, clearly there are those that didn't get all they wanted. The lawyers started with the point of view, nothing needs to change, the sun is shining and the sky is bright. The doctors started with the view that there are thunderstorms overhead and the world's coming to an end. My job was to try to bring those diametrically opposed views together, and I think in the end we passed significant tort reform in Oklahoma.
Well, let's follow up on, excuse me, 2661 just a little bit, and give us an overview of just the major things that 2661 did that we didn't have before that is now the law.
So that I don't make the mistake of exaggerating or naming something that did not become law, let me read just a few highlights, I think, from the legislation. For the first time in our history, it defines frivolous lawsuits and sets sanctions against attorneys and plaintiffs who bring them. That's never happened before. It addresses the practice of abusive discovery, and you're a lawyer and you understand that better than I do, but the use of pretrial questioning to intimidate or harass witnesses. It limited forum shopping, and we all remember that a colleague of mine sent a letter out to lawyers in other states, and Wall Street Journal story and all that. We have limited that behavior and put sanctions in if you conduct yourself in that fashion, so that where the incident or accident or damage occurred is where the trial will be, rather than forum shopping looking for a friendly setting. It allows for, and this was a very big deal to a couple, 3 Republicans, business courts, so that we can have experts on the bench that understand the business world and not just the legal world. That was included. It protects medical volunteers. That was a big issue the previous year that was left out, so that if a retired doctor, nurse, whatever, is volunteering, providing health care, and we appreciate that, they're not exposed to the lawsuit threat. A major thing that the Wall Street Journal discussed in a lengthy article, and it's so simplistic to me, not being a doctor or a lawyer, the new law says to a doctor who's had a bad outcome with a patient, can say, I'm sorry, this outcome is not what we hoped for, and that cannot be used in court any longer. And apparently that is a major issue, at least it was with those who opposed including it. There are several others, but I'll
Let me jump in here and get us to a break, and we
Okay.
can pick up there if that's where you'd like to start again when we start the second half of our show. Mick Cornett, Kent Myers, this is The Verdict. We're visiting with Cal Hobson.
American Express Tax and Business Services. We're accountants. We do taxes, business valuations, estate planning, and consulting. And we're right here in Oklahoma, working with the owners of small and medium-sized businesses. Steve Wilsey and Stuart Meyer have the resources and the experience. American Express Tax and Business Services. In Oklahoma City, the phone number is 405-843-5311.
Has the constant increase in your cable bills got you a bit upset? Is not being able to see your favorite sporting events leaving you a little lightheaded? With Dish Network and SET Pro Communications, we make it simple. Call today before 3 p.m. and have it installed today. Dish Network and SET Pro Communications are here to serve you with quality English and Spanish programming. Get activated for as little as $29.99 a month. Mention KSBI and receive a free high-definition receiver or a DVR personal recorder system. Free satellite dish, free installation. Let Dish Network and SET Pro Communications give you the quality programming you deserve.
St. Gregory's University has been changing the lives of people like me for 125 years. Affordable private Catholic education, balanced with dedication to community and service, makes St. Gregory special. We're extremely proud of our students' outstanding academic achievements and our nationally ranked athletic teams. It's when you help a student build a future of balance, integrity, and service that you change a life forever. St. Gregory's, a community for life.
Log on to ksbitv.com today and get all the latest information on Oklahoma's family station. Get Brady's weather information updated 24 hours a day. The most interactive weather technology in the market is now at your fingertips. Get current temperatures and weather conditions. You can even take a tour of KSBI's State Cam network. Check out what's coming up next on Hello Oklahoma. You can find it all: fashion, community, recipes. Send us your feedback and tell us what you like about KSBI. KSBITV.com.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett, Kent Myers, and State Senator Cal Hobson. During the last session regarding tort reform, there was the impression that maybe a moratorium had been applied and that maybe we wouldn't be visiting tort reform in future sessions. What played out there?
Yep. Let's be clear here. The Constitution and the right of free speech cannot be violated even by the state legislature, and so any member next year that wants to file any piece of legislation obviously will have the ability to do that, and will. I expect there will be numerous pieces of legislation to refine 2661, abolish 2661, whatever. On the moratorium issue, we need to know what really happened, and here's what really happened. There is an entity known as PLICO, and without getting into all the painful details, PLICO is a physician liability insurance company, and it insures 80% of all Oklahoma doctors. The moratorium related to the recapitalization or the funding requirements of PLICO, because PLICO is in such desperate shape, financially upside down. And so PLICO needed and asked for the moratorium about their financial environment to benefit the doctors. And as a part of that, the doctors in Oklahoma were not required under our law to come up with a $10,000 promissory note each to fund PLICO. So that's what the moratorium discussion was all about.
It wasn't about tort reform in general, it was about that one specific issue.
There's certainly people that would love for there not to be a discussion about tort reform, perhaps on both sides, for 6 years, but that's not the way democracy works.
Okay. You mentioned the Wall Street Journal a time or two, and we've got an overblown, or oversized, I should say, chart of a 2-page Wall Street Journal ad that appeared July 27th, at least in the Oklahoma edition of the Wall Street Journal. And it shows Oklahoma as one of the states, with 7 others, as states where people or doctors, particularly in this case neurosurgeons, are moving out. This headline says, "Before you move in, look who's moving out." And it says, with careers of bonanza verdicts and beholden votes, Kerry and Edwards have made these states hazardous to the health of families and businesses. Lots of comments about, the neurosurgeons think 2661 didn't do anything because they're still moving out. This came about 60 days after our 2661 was signed by the governor. What are your thoughts about that 2-page Wall Street Journal ad?
Anybody that's got lots of money can buy big ads in expensive newspapers. And that particular segment of our medical profession is clearly one that feels the stress of their malpractice insurance greater than others. But let me cite a couple, 3 facts, if I may. I think you almost introduced that as overblown, and I think you ended up saying oversized. I think it is overblown from this perspective. The American Medical Association, a much broader representation of the medical world, says Oklahoma is not a state in malpractice crisis. Second, if I may, on average, the general surgeon in Oklahoma in 2003 paid about $17,000 a year for medical malpractice insurance. In Texas, again, where people often look and say everything's lovely down there, it was $39,000. In Missouri, it was $51,000. So my point is that as you deal with the issue of tort, you certainly can find sub-elements that we need to give special attention to, and that's what we did with OBGYN, with emergency room people. And finally, in our 16 hours of sworn testimony, which is a lot spread over 4 meetings, there was not one witness, not one, that stood and said, let me tell you about a runaway jury case that awarded an outrageous sum of money in a particular medical malpractice case. Not one.
This ad suggests that neurosurgeons are leaving the state as other people are moving in. Are you aware of that happening?
I can tell you again, I live in the little town of Lexington. We don't have a hospital, so we don't have any neurosurgeons. I haven't seen anybody of that caliber move in or out of Lexington recently. But since 1996, the percent increase of doctors in Oklahoma is up 7% from 1996 to 2003. I cannot credibly verify whether we have a decline in the neurosurgeon population or not. I can tell you that very recently I met with 3 prominent physicians from the Health Sciences Center that expressed the desire of continued work. These are baby doctors, not neurosurgeons. Continued work on the subject of tort reform. Staff and I took extensive notes, and so I'm trying to learn and be responsive where we have weaknesses in the tort system, but I cannot confirm or deny the numbers of neurosurgeons in Oklahoma.
What do you expect to happen in the 2005 legislative session in the subject of tort reform?
Let me take you back to last summer. Last summer, the State Chamber communicated with me that their #1 issue was tort reform, even though there had been tort reform the previous year. And so we worked very hard on that topic. Towards the end of the session, others said, no, Cal, you've got it all wrong. It was really workers' compensation that we wanted you to work on. So we have a task force now diligently evaluating Oklahoma's workers' compensation system. It would be my guess that there will be a great deal of fire and emotion and all that on workers' comp, but perhaps also further dialogue about tort. But you can only get to so many major issues, and quite frankly, if you look at the staff commitment, the expert witness commitment, and the competing interests discussions on tort reform, it was given an enormous amount of attention in 2004.
We're running out of time, but we got about 30 seconds. Can you give us a scenario that you see shaping up in the House and Senate races coming up in November?
In the State House and State Senate, very close. It'll be battled down to the wire. I think, knowing the candidates on both sides as I do, I think the House holds on the Democratic column, and I'm certainly confident that the Senate will as well.
All right. Cal Hobson, State Senator, we appreciate you coming in.
Thank you very much.
Thanks once again.
Thank you, Ken.
Ken and I'll be back with the final word after this.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
Wiggins in to do the kicking. Here's the snap, and the kick is away.
when severe weather threatens your family's safety.
I line out to the west, so we'll be checking that.
Brady Bruce and the KSBI weather team have the most up-to-date, interactive weather technology in the market to keep you informed with pinpoint details of exactly where storms are occurring.
Very, very detailed radar picture here. No question whatsoever.
Without unnecessary hype or sensationalism.
You don't need to go up Northwest Expressway right now. Just don't do it. Keep it here on KSBI, your family's weather source.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. We're wrapping up today's show, in which we visited with State Senator Cal Hobson.
Cal is always an interesting guest. He has a lot to tell us, and he knows a lot that sometimes suspect he doesn't tell us, but he can't tell us. But he knows what's going on at the state capitol. He knows what's going on with tort reform. He knows what went on with tort reform in this last session. It is indeed an issue that's going to rear its head again in this upcoming session, no doubt about it, along with, as he correctly predicted, I think, workers' compensation. I think these are going to be two of the hottest issues in the upcoming session. And Cal is a senator that leads the Senate in a very difficult time, and with a very close balance of power between the Republicans and the Democrats, is able to bring about consensus on many issues that lesser statesmen couldn't do. And we're pleased he'd share his wisdom with us. Speaking of sharing wisdom, next week we're going to have the U.S. Senate candidate Dr. Tom Coburn join us again now that he has won his Republican primary without a runoff, and he'll be telling us about what he thinks about his chances in the upcoming general election. As always, Tom Coburn is a very interesting, thoughtful guest, and we look forward to his visit.
And we intend to have Congressman Brad Carson, or former Congressman Brad Carson.
Yes, in a week or two after we have Tom on, we'll have Brad Carson on to discuss the other side of that coin, I suspect. And they have both agreed, I hope they remember, but they have both agreed to come back on this show together as the election gets closer and debate about which of them should be elected the United States Senator.
And I called him former congressman. I guess technically he's still a congressman, but not running for re-election, running for the U.S. Senate.
Correct.
Also want you to check out our website, theverdict.tv. Go there and give us an idea of a guest that you'd like to see on a future edition of The Verdict. For Kent Myers, I'm Mick Cornett. We'll see you next time right here on KSBI on The Verdict.